You ever hear something so cold, so unforgivable, your heart don't even break right away? It just stops? That's what happened the day my son called me and said, "Ma, don't come to my wedding. Only Dad is invited. If you show up, we'll have you removed." Just like that. No lead-in. No apology. Just a gut punch straight from the mouth of the same boy I carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, prayed over in hospital rooms, and defended even when I shouldn't have. That boy. Sheila. I'm a mother. And if you've ever been a mother, then you know what it means to love past logic, past betrayal, past your own pain. But I wasn't prepared for that phone call. I remember everything about that day. The smell of my coffee, half drunk. The TV was playing some talk show in the background, but all I could hear was Jaden's voice. Sharp, dismissive, like I was some woman who showed up begging him for a favor. Not his mother. He said it clear. Only Dad is walking me down the aisle. We already talked about it. I don't want drama on my wedding day. You'll get the pictures later. He said he didn't want drama. I raised him in the drama. Scrubbing toilets and pulling doubles to make sure he had shoes on his feet and school supplies that weren't hand-me-downs. When his father left me, for another woman and 2 new kids, I was the one still packing lunches and kissing scraped knees. But here Jaden was, making me feel like I was a problem. Like my presence would ruin the most important day of his life. And the worst part, he meant it. I asked him one time, "Jaden, why would you say that to me?" And you know what he said? "It's just better this way, Ma. Don't make this about you. Don't make this about me." Lord. That boy has no idea what I swallowed to make sure his life wasn't about me. That night, I sat in my kitchen chair for hours. I didn't cry right away. I just stared. All I could think about was the first time he said, "Mama." The way he used to grab my pinky finger when he was scared. And how he used to say, "When I grow up, I'm gonna buy you a big house, Mama." Funny how things change. I didn't tell nobody at first. Not my sister, not my best friend, not even my pastor. I didn't want pity. I didn't want advice. I just wanted to understand why. But see, what I didn't know at that point was why was bigger than just a hurtful phone call. Much bigger. What I didn't know was that this wedding, this guest list, this rejection, it wasn't just Jaden being ungrateful. It was part of something darker. Something that started long before the invitations went out. And baby, by the time I found out the whole truth, I wasn't just mourning a wedding I wasn't invited to. I was standing at the center of a storm I didn't see coming. A storm full of secrets, betrayal, and shame so heavy, it had been covered up for over a decade. But I'll get to that. Let me start at the beginning. Before the lies. Before the letter. Before the revenge. Before the moment my son looked at me and said I wasn't welcome. If you're watching this from anywhere in the world, Detroit, Charlotte, Chicago, doesn't matter, sit tight. You're about to hear a story that'll have your jaw on the floor and your heart in your hands. And if you've ever loved a child more than they loved you back, stay with me. This ain't just my story. Might be yours too. You don't forget the day your baby takes his first steps. Jaden was 9 months old. The floor was cold. I had just come off a night shift at the nursing home, and my knees were still aching. But none of that mattered when he let go of the couch, stumbled toward me, and landed right on my chest. I laughed so hard I cried. He looked up, smiling that gummy smile, like he knew he'd done something great. I held him for the next 10 minutes straight, just whispering, "Mama's proud of you," over and over. That's the boy I raised. I raised him through asthma attacks that kept us in the ER more times than I can count. I raised him through winter nights when the heat got cut off and I had to warm the place with pots of boiling water and prayer. I raised him when Anthony, his father, walked out on us like we were bad credit. Me be clear. Anthony didn't die. He didn't disappear. He left. Left me with a 6-month-old and excuses about not being ready to be a father. Funny how ready he got when his little girlfriend popped up pregnant a year later. 2 more babies. New wife. New life. And suddenly, he had all the love in the world to give, but not for the child he already had. But I never let Jaden feel that lack. I was mama and daddy. Birthday balloons, back-to-school shopping, science projects, choir rehearsals. I did it all. I sold Avon, cleaned offices, and worked overnight as a home health aide just to make ends meet. We didn't have much, but he always had what he needed, and a little more. For years it was just me and him against the world. My boy. My baby. The one who used to make me Mother's Day cards out of construction paper that said, "I'm glad I got you, Mama." But something shifted when he turned 17. It wasn't overnight, no. It started small. Missed curfews, new attitudes, calling his daddy Pop like he'd earned the title. I'd ask where he was going and he'd shrug. "To Dad's," he'd say, like it wasn't a knife each time he did. First, I was glad they were reconnecting. I thought maybe it was healing. Maybe Jaden could get what I never had. A father who showed up. But it didn't take long to realize Anthony wasn't just reconnecting. He was rewriting. Suddenly, I wasn't the woman who'd held Jaden's hand through fevers and finals. I was the strict one. The bitter one. Anthony was the cool dad with gifts and a house in the suburbs. And I was just the woman who held him back. I heard those words once, straight from Jaden's mouth. "I could have done more if you weren't always so paranoid, Ma." That stung. Because I wasn't paranoid. I was protective. There's a difference. But Anthony, he had time and money now. He took Jaden on trips. Let him drive his car. Bought him a chain for graduation. And that little girl Jaden was dating. Anthony was all up in that too. I'd see them laughing at cookouts like they were one big happy family. They painted me out like I was the villain in a story I wrote from scratch. And even then I didn't fight it. I stayed quiet. Kept cooking Sunday dinners. Kept praying. I just wanted my baby to know I was still here. That I was the one who taught him how to walk. Not that man who swooped in when the hard part was over. But as time went on, Jaden started walking farther and farther away. From me. From the truth. From the woman who made him. And by the time that wedding invite or lack thereof came, I wasn't even surprised. Heartbroken, yes. But surprised. Because long before he told me I wasn't welcome, he'd already started treating me like I didn't belong. You ever meet somebody and something in your spirit just says, "Watch her"? That's how I felt the first time I met her. Kara. Jaden brought her over one afternoon during his sophomore year in college. He said, "Ma, this is Kiara," all proud like he'd just introduced me to Michelle Obama. She smiled real sweet, leaned in for a hug, said all the right things. "So nice to meet you, Mrs. Sheila. Your son talks about you all the time." I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted to believe I was being paranoid. That I wasn't just one of those overprotective moms who side-eyes every girl her son brings home. But the thing is, love don't lie. Energy don't lie. And mothers, we see things before they show up. The way she looked at Jaden wasn't love. It was control. Quiet, polished control. She wrapped herself around him like a ribbon on a gift. But I could see she was the one doing the choosing. And Jaden, bless his heart. He didn't even know he'd been picked up and placed into somebody else's story. She was beautiful, no lie. Well-spoken. Always dressed just right. But she never looked me in the eye. Always too eager, always too polished. You know the type. Can quote Bible verses but can't take correction. First I brushed it off. Told myself maybe I was just being sensitive. Until the comments started. She said you call too much, Ma. Just let us breathe. Kiara thinks you don't really support us, you just want control. And my favorite. Kiara says you have old school views on relationships. Now hold on. I've been working and sacrificing since Jaden had Similac on his breath. And now some 25-year-old telling me how to be a mother. Telling my son how to see me. I tried to keep it respectful. I pulled Jaden aside one day and said, "Listen, I'm not trying to come between you and your girl, but you need to watch how she moves. Not every smile means safety." And do you know what that boy told me? Kiara told me you'd say that. So now I'm predictable. I called Anthony thinking maybe we could put our differences aside for the sake of our child. That maybe he'd talk some sense into him. Remind him who raised him. Remind him that no woman should be pulling him away from his family like that. But Anthony, he flipped the script. Started talking about how I always did have an issue with other women. How I need to let Jaden live his own life. He even said, maybe you just don't want to see him happy. Me. The same woman who skipped meals to make sure Jaden had lunch money. I realized right then. They'd made me the villain again. Him and her. She smiled and he followed. She whispered and he echoed. It was like watching someone you love get caught in a riptide, and every time you scream, "Come back," they just drift further. Sunday dinners turned into quick visits. Phone calls turned into text messages. And eventually even those stopped coming. The final straw. They moved in together and didn't tell me. I found out through a Facebook photo. Jaden on a rooftop with Kiara, captioned, "Building our future." And all I could do was stare. Not at them, but at how far he'd gone. From his mama's boy to this polished puppet I barely recognized. But I stayed quiet. Because sometimes silence ain't weakness. It's just waiting. Waiting to see how far they'd go. Waiting to see who they'd become. Waiting for the truth to show itself. And baby, when I tell you it did. Phew. But we ain't there yet. I don't know if you've ever held something so small it made your whole body go numb. A single envelope. Cream-colored, thick stock, gold trim. Classy. Elegant. Expensive. Just like she would pick. It came through the mail like any other piece of paper. No warning. No knock on the door. Just there. Sitting bold in my mailbox like it had the right. When I flipped it over and saw their names printed in cursive across the wax seal, I already knew. But I opened it anyway. The first line said, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Kiara Lavon Hart and Jaden Elijah Wright." And then, in bold letters underneath, "To Mr. Anthony Wright and guest." Not Sheila. Not Ms. Wright. Not even mother of the groom. Nothing. Just his father and whatever woman he happened to be dragging around these days. I sat down right on the floor. The envelope still open on my lap like it had punched me in the stomach. I kept reading it thinking maybe I missed something. Maybe I was on the back. Maybe it was a mistake. But no, it wasn't. It was a message. Delivered in gold-foiled elegance. A message that screamed, "You are not welcome here." Not just from Kiara. I expected that shade. But from Jaden. That broke something in me. And let me tell you what made it worse, because it always gets worse before it gets better. The very next day, one of the church ladies from back home, Miss Brenda, caught me outside the Piggly Wiggly and said, "Girl, you must be so excited. What you wearing to the wedding? Don't tell me you got that dress made already." I smiled the way only a hurt woman can smile. You know the one. That smile that keeps your pain from bubbling up and spilling out in public. That smile that says, "I'm fine, but your soul already calling for backup," I said, still figuring it out, and walked off before the tears did. That week the phone calls started. Folks I hadn't heard from in months were ringing me up, all excited like we was about to throw the royal wedding. "Chilly, I saw Jaden's engagement photos. Y'all done raised a king. Now you know I better see you front row in that mother of the groom seat." And I kept saying the same lie with a different tone. "We'll see. It's a busy season." But deep down, I was swallowing a silence so thick it felt like sin. Because see, this ain't just about a wedding. It's about erasure. You carry a boy in your womb. You push him out. You raise him on your back while the world breaks your spirit. And one day he turns around and invites everybody but you to his celebration. That's not oversight. That's intentional. Could have said something. Could have called him and let it all loose. Could have made a scene on social media like folks love to do these days. But I didn't. I let them write their guest list. I let them print their invitations. I let them plan their picture-perfect day. And I started planning too. Not revenge. Not drama. Just the beginning of my rewrite. Because if my name wasn't on their invitation, then they better pray it don't end up on something else. You ever been doing something so ordinary, so harmless, it feels unfair when life decides to punch you in the throat right in the middle of it? That was me. In my late Aunt Lorraine's house, wiping dust off old curtains and throwing out expired cans of peaches. Nothing dramatic. Just boxes, papers, memories. She passed a month before the wedding was set to happen. No kids, no husband left. Just me, the niece she always loved like a daughter. So I made it my duty to clean the place up before we listed it. That's how I was raised. You honor people's memory by not leaving their house in chaos. I had just opened this heavy trunk she kept in her back closet. Mostly church programs, greeting cards, and yellowed photos. But tucked inside an old Bible, between Psalm 27 and Ecclesiastes, was an envelope. My name was on it. Full name. Sheila Dion Mercer. It wasn't dated. But I knew that handwriting. Lorraine had always written like her letters were being judged at a spelling bee. Inside was a printed email. From Anthony. My heart beat a little faster, but I told myself it was probably something old, something dumb. Back when they used to talk. She was his cousin after all. But then I read it. And my whole damn world flipped on its back. Lorraine. You were right. I had my doubts when Jaden was born. I did the test 2 years ago. He's not mine. But that's between us. I don't care. Let her keep thinking I don't know. I've already started talking to him differently. He'll see her for who she really is. I had to read it twice. 3 times. And then I just sat there. Staring. Unable to breathe. Not because I was ashamed. Not because I was guilty. But because that man had known the truth for years and used it like a knife behind my back. I always knew he had darkness in him. But I didn't know he'd go that far. Let me be clear. I never lied about Jaden's father. Anthony was there when he was born. He signed the papers. We were together. There was no other man during that time. But before him, there was someone. One mistake I never revisited, one moment I buried deep. And when I got pregnant, Anthony swore he'd raise Jaden as his own. Until clearly he didn't. He went and got a secret DNA test, found out what he wanted to know. And instead of being a man, instead of sitting me down or confronting me, he used it as currency. He poisoned my son against me. He let Jaden grow up thinking I was manipulative, controlling, dishonest. He whispered things behind my back. Gave Kiara the ammunition to call me toxic. Used my silence as evidence. And the whole time he knew the truth, but twisted it into a weapon I couldn't even defend myself from, because I never saw it coming. And I promise you, When I looked back at every argument, every distance that started forming after Jaden turned 17, it all made sense. That was around the time Anthony started showing up again, offering Jaden money, taking him on little father-son trips, giving him advice about watching women's behavior. Lord, he had planted a seed, and it had grown into something ugly, something I couldn't recognize anymore. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope, not because I was done with it, but because I wasn't going to waste a second exposing him until the time was right. Let him think he still had the upper hand. Let them both enjoy their little fairy tale wedding. Because what Anthony didn't realize is that lies don't stay buried. And truth has a funny way of showing up when you least expect it. And baby, mine had arrived. You know what hurts the most? It ain't the betrayal. It's the gaslighting. The way they twist your love and sacrifice into something dark, just so they can feel better about stabbing you in the back. I gave them everything. And when I say everything, I don't mean figuratively. I mean I poured every ounce of my youth, my energy, my hope into building up a man who didn't even see me as human once he got what he wanted. Then I did it again, for a son I thought would be different. Turns out they were mirror images of each other. See, back in 2005, Anthony came to me with this idea. He had a buddy opening a contracting firm in Maryland. Said they needed a woman with good credit to co-sign a startup loan, just for formalities. I had just paid off my Toyota and cleaned up my credit report, so I qualified. He sat across from me at the kitchen table with Jaden sleeping in the next room, told me, "You'll always be part of this, Sheila. You're building something for our son's future." Sign. No questions. No second thoughts. Because back then, I still believed he had an ounce of decency. That company now has 3 office locations. It's worth over $2.4 million. And my name, wiped off every legal document after the first year. I only found out the truth 2 weeks after that email from Aunt Lorraine. I'd been stewing over what to do when I called an old friend of mine, Teresa, who used to work in finance at one of the banks Anthony did business with. I asked her to quietly check into something for me. What she found nearly knocked me off my feet. Not only was my name used to secure the original business loan, but Anthony never removed it after the company was launched. He just stopped telling me. That loan stayed under my credit profile for 5 years. I paid interest I didn't even know about, quietly deducted from my taxes because I was still listed as a joint filer for the business entity, even though I hadn't seen a dime. And you want to know what that company is funding now? The wedding. My son's wedding. The same son who told me not to show up. The same one who said I'd make it uncomfortable. Kiara's dress. Paid for by my ruined credit history. The wedding planner. Cut a check straight from a Blackstone account. So tell me, how does it feel to be the invisible backbone of a celebration you were never welcome at? Feels like grief. Not grief for what I lost, but grief for what I never really had. Man who valued me. Child who saw me. A family that wasn't built on performance. Anthony didn't just lie. He used me. He stole from me. And the cherry on top, he told Jaden I was the thief. That I once stole money from his grandmother. That I was unstable, manipulative, spiteful. I couldn't figure out where Jaden got those stories from. Why he'd look at me sideways, flinch when I raised my voice, question my every move. Now I know. Anthony had been sowing those lies for years. Poisoning the well until there was nothing left but suspicion. And Jaden drank it all, willingly. But here's the part that makes me laugh now. They thought I'd just go away quietly. They thought erasing me would be easy. But baby, I was raised by women who knew how to survive. Who knew how to hold their dignity in one hand and vengeance in the other without ever breaking a sweat. So I started documenting everything. I had proof of the loan, bank records, letters, credit reports. I even got a quiet consult with a lawyer just to make sure I wasn't overreaching. Turns out, I had grounds for fraud, identity theft, tax evasion. Anthony had committed crimes, federal ones, and I had receipts. But revenge wasn't about jail. Not yet. Revenge was about exposure. And trust me when I say, this wasn't just about getting even anymore. This was about getting my name back. And making sure neither of them could ever hide behind lies again. Let me tell y'all something my grandma used to say. The truth don't sleep. It waits. And when it wakes up, baby, it comes with a vengeance. After everything I uncovered, the stolen loan, the lies about my character, the wedding being funded by my own damn name, I couldn't sleep. Not out of fear, but because something in me had finally clicked into place. That soft, forgiving, always making excuses woman. She was gone. What was left? A woman with a long memory and a fire that wouldn't die. Now I needed proof. I needed to show that all these years, it wasn't me who tore this family apart. It was Anthony. And someone out there knew what he'd done. That's when I remembered Curtis. Curtis Whitmore was Anthony's best friend back in the day. They were thick as thieves, until one day they suddenly stopped speaking. I never knew why, but something told me. Curtis might know more than he ever let on. So I reached out. I didn't threaten, I didn't beg. I just said, Curtis, if there's anything you've been holding on to, now's the time to tell it. Because I ain't coming for drama. I'm coming for the truth. And I think you've had it locked in a drawer for too damn long. There was silence for a minute. Then I heard this sigh. Come by tomorrow. I drove an hour and 20 minutes the next day with my heart damn near pounding through my ribs. I sat in that man's kitchen, across from a face I hadn't seen in over 15 years. He looked older, tired, like regret had been sitting heavy on his shoulders for a while. And then he started talking. Anthony been planning to cut you out since before Jaden hit middle school, he said. He used to brag about it. Said he was just biding his time until you served your purpose. Then he was gonna erase you and rewrite the story. I didn't flinch. I just stared. Back in 2008, Curtis continued. He showed me the first draft of those business docs with your name already faded out. He said he had plans to make it all his and the boys. He even laughed about using your credit. Called it repayment for years of nagging. That man laughed over using me like a doormat. But Curtis wasn't done. He stood up, walked to a dusty old file cabinet in the corner, and pulled out a folder. Kept. Because I knew one day he'd pushed too far. Inside were copies of emails Anthony had sent, from his old business account, talking about neutralizing the threat and securing leverage over Sheila. There were bank transfers, too. Ones Anthony had made using an account still partly tied to my name. He had documents prepared to shift ownership completely without my knowledge, and even had a notary forged on one of the contracts. Forgery. Had no idea. I sat there numb. 'Cause for years I thought I was crazy. I thought maybe I'd overreacted. That maybe I was too emotional. But now I had paper proof. Curtis leaned back in his chair, looked me dead in the eye and said, I didn't speak up back then. Should've. But I ain't gonna sit quiet now and watch you get buried by lies. That moment. It was like my soul inhaled for the first time in decades. Thanked him. We hugged. And I promised him. This ain't revenge. It's resurrection. I'm not coming to destroy. I'm coming to rebuild. That night, I laid everything out on my kitchen table. Old credit reports, Curtis's emails, signed papers, photos, tax records. I wasn't just a bitter mother trying to crash a wedding. I was a woman with a case, with a voice, and baby with evidence. So to anybody out there that's ever been lied on, discarded, or erased, let me tell you something real clear. They can bury the truth under 1,000 bricks of manipulation, but the truth never dies. It just waits for the right hands to bring it back to life. And my hands were steady now. Weddings got a funny way of making folks act like royalty. Like the crown ain't crooked and the throne ain't built on lies. Jaden's wedding was all folks could talk about that week. Social media lit up. Engagement photos, venue teasers, floral arrangements, the whole nine. Folks were reposting like it was a royal event. Meanwhile, the Queen Mother wasn't even invited. See, I didn't need an invite. I didn't need a seat at their table to flip the whole table over. They thought I was back in Georgia, that I'd crawled back home to lick my wounds, cry into a pie, and watch the live stream from my little kitchen like some pitiful exiled mama. Nah, baby. I was already in Charlotte. Had been since Tuesday. Quiet. Deliberate. Lone. I checked into a hotel 6 minutes from the venue under a different name. Ms. Renee Johnson. Fake name, real mission. I wasn't there to interrupt. I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't even there for drama. I was there to witness. To let the lies get dressed up, take their vows, and dig their own graves. I walked the area like a ghost, hood up, glasses on, head down. But every step I took was a step closer to closure. Not revenge the way they imagined. No, this was surgical. I wasn't burning anything down. I was cutting the cancer out. That Thursday, I took a slow walk around the hotel where most of the guests were staying. I spotted Anthony at the lobby bar laughing with a woman who wasn't the one he left me for. Guess new lies come with new side pieces. That man had aged like spoiled milk, and I didn't feel one drop of nostalgia. A shame that I ever gave him my 20s. On Friday, I visited the venue grounds. Not to cause a scene. I just wanted to see it. They picked one of those high-end outdoor barn venues, the kind with string lights, gold chairs, and white roses growing up the columns. Pretty on the outside, rotten underneath. Fitting. Security was tight. You'd think the president's niece was getting married. I stood across the road and watched for a while. Then I went back to my hotel and opened my folder again. I wasn't going to stop the wedding, but I was going to make sure everyone in their little fairy tale kingdom heard the truth before the honeymoon was over. Saturday came, and the city buzzed like a beehive. I overheard a girl in the cafe gushing about the Hampton wedding. Not knowing I was the mother of the groom, she said, ghosted his mom years ago because she was abusive. Abusive. I almost choked on my coffee. The lies had grown their own legs and were walking the streets with pride. But I didn't flinch. Because I knew something they didn't. I'd also mailed a confidential packet to the venue coordinator. You ever see a wedding venue panic when they learn one of their clients forged notary signatures and had a fraud investigation pending? I wasn't out for blood. I was out for balance. And this weekend, that scale was gonna tip. They played with my name. Used it, erased it, twisted it, and built their fantasies on top of it. But you can't bury the root and expect the fruit to be sweet. This wedding week was my rebirth week. Not the kind with streamers and cake. The kind where a woman reclaims her narrative. Lone, strong, and smiling with a secret. I didn't knock. I didn't text. I didn't ask permission. I just walked in. Lone. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't wait to be called. I just stood up. Right in the middle of the toasts. After the best man fumbled through some tired jokes. I stood up in that deep red dress, held my small envelope in one hand, and let the other rest on the edge of the table like I'd been holding back a storm for years. Jaden saw me and stiffened. Anthony's grip on his champagne glass turned white. And the mic. It didn't come to me. Took it. See, I wasn't invited to speak. But what they forgot was, without me there wouldn't even be a wedding. There wouldn't be a Jaden. And the truth they tried to bury. That truth had legs. I raised the mic like it was a scalpel, not a microphone. My name is Sheila, I said. Mother of the groom. And no matter what you've heard, I am his mother. A few folks shifted in their chairs. Some stared like I'd interrupted a sacred ceremony. But I wasn't here for their comfort. I pulled out the folded letter. Old paper. My aunt's handwriting, the one she left tucked inside a family Bible. Meant for me, never meant for the public. But betrayal don't deserve privacy. I read it. Word for word. She had written, Sheila, I don't know when or if you'll ever find this. But if you do, don't let them erase you. Anthony always knew. He took a paternity test. He told me himself. Said he'd wait for the right moment to use it against you. Kept going. And for years, I said. He let that boy believe I was the liar. Problem. The mistake. All while cashing checks in his name. Using my credit to build a business that's now paying for this very dinner. Jaden's face turned hollow. I looked right at him. You don't have to love me. You never did. But you won't rewrite me out of my own story. Not without consequence. Silence choked the room. Anthony looked like a man caught in the rain with nowhere to run. He tried to speak, but what words can clean up that kind of mess? I handed the letter to Jaden. Your real story starts now, I said. Then I handed the mic back. Didn't drop it. Didn't storm off. I just returned it like I was finished doing surgery. 'Cause I was. I turned and walked out. And baby, you could feel the air leave that room like truth had just cracked the windows open. Jaden didn't wait for dessert. The moment I walked out, he followed, storming past tables, knocking over a wine glass. His face all twisted up in confusion and panic. Not anger. Panic. Because everything he thought he knew just got set on fire in front of 100 people. The wedding. Halted. Music stopped. People whispered. You could almost hear forks pausing mid-air. I didn't look back. I had no interest in seeing who stayed seated or who stood stunned. My truth wasn't up for debate. But the next part, that was where it got surgical. See, I wasn't done. As I made my way out the ballroom, I took a slow detour toward the table where the bride's family sat, all dressed like royalty and sipping expensive disappointment. The father, tall, quiet man with a reputation for being no-nonsense, locked eyes with me the moment I approached. He had that look of a man who sensed something foul in the air but hadn't located the source. I didn't speak loud. Didn't need to. I slipped him the folder I'd been carrying since I landed in town. Plain black folder. Nothing flashy. But inside, phew, years of pain. Reduced to documentation. Stolen identity. Forged property deeds. Business bank accounts opened in my name, without my knowledge. Signatures that didn't match. And guess who orchestrated it all? Anthony. And Jaden. My own son. Turns out, that successful family business Anthony used to brag about at church cookouts. It was funded with credit lines tied to my social. Years ago. Back when I was still fighting to keep my house and didn't know why credit card offers stopped coming. And Jaden. He was the golden name on the paperwork. The beneficiary. The trusted heir. They used me to build it. Then turned around and told the world I was too bitter to be proud. I leaned in close to the bride's father and whispered, You might want to have your lawyers look through that. Before your daughter legally ties herself to this circus. His eyes didn't blink. He just nodded, real slow, like a man who had just realized the mansion he built had termites in the foundation. Meanwhile, behind us, the bride's mother was trying to get her daughter to breathe. And Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Jaden was outside somewhere, pacing the sidewalk like a man who'd just read his own obituary. I didn't go to ruin the wedding. I went to reclaim my name. To make sure the truth didn't just come out, but landed. Because here's the thing, blood doesn't lie. But DNA, baby. DNA can be manipulated, twisted, hidden behind silence and secrets. And loyalty can become a weapon in the wrong hands. They wanted to shame me in silence. Instead, I handed them truth on letterhead. The crowd watched, and for the first time that night, I wasn't the one people were whispering about. By morning, 5 missed calls. All from Jaden. The same boy who told me I'd be embarrassed if I ever showed up. The same boy who let another woman iron his shirt for the biggest day of his life, but couldn't make room for the one who made sure he had clean socks when we barely had water. He didn't leave no voicemail. Just called. Again. And again. And again. You ever notice how folk only find your number when the rug gets pulled? I didn't answer. Not then. Not the next day. Not even when he texted one word. Why? Why? That's the $1,000,000 question, ain't it? Why didn't I just stay quiet? Why couldn't I let him have his day? Why couldn't I keep the past buried like they hoped I would? I let my silence speak louder than I ever could. Then Anthony started. First, it was a slick text message, talking about how I better be ready for the consequences of defamation. Said he was speaking to lawyers and wouldn't let my bitterness destroy their future. You know what I did? I printed that message. Put it right next to the forged documents with my stolen signature. 'Cause see, I don't move on threats. I move on truth. And the truth had been in my purse all along. Back home I took that folder, the one I gave a glimpse of at the gala, and I walked it into the police station. Quiet. Steady. Unbothered. Sat down with an officer, told him everything. Showed him the ID theft, the property scam, the bank fraud, the forged business account using my name and Jaden's as co-signer. You could see it hit him like a wave. And when I slid across the printouts of those accounts opened while I was still in a rehab facility for a slip disc, that officer just shook his head, asked if I had any recordings. I handed him the flash drive, the one the bride's father copied for me before he made his move. See, that man didn't just walk out the ballroom for drama. He walked into a law office the very next morning and filed a report of his own. Misrepresentation, financial deception, business entanglement through marriage. When he found out the family business his daughter was about to marry into was built on a stolen identity and a faked narrative, he flipped. And I ain't blame him one bit. Now the dominoes were lined up. Jaden tried calling again. This time, I could hear the desperation in his voice just from the way the ringtone danced. But I was no longer the mother who'd pick up and fix it. I was the woman who finally saw the knife in her own back, and wasn't afraid to name who held it. They made me their villain. Whispered lies about me for years. Fed stories to friends, churchfolk, employers, even strangers online, just to make me look like some bitter, washed-up, overprotective single mama who couldn't let go. But truth don't care how pretty your wedding invitations are. And when the dust clears, the villain you painted might be the only one left standing. Because I ain't come for revenge. Came for my name. And baby, I got it back. Let me tell you how karma cashes out. After I handed over every shred of documentation I had, fraudulent property transfers, forged loan applications, bank withdrawals I never authorized, it didn't take long before the right people started moving. The bride's father made the first call. Quiet man but sharp. Had a private investigator on payroll to work for him. Turns out Anthony's business, the one he always bragged about, the one funding all their big boy fantasies, was built on my identity, my credit, and a shell game of false paperwork. And once the bank got wind of it, phew, you should have seen the panic. Accounts frozen. Contracts voided. Investors pulled out like rats from a sinking ship. The same man who once told me I was bitter for asking about a loan I never took out. He was now sitting in his office watching everything he'd stolen slip through his fingers. As for Jaden, oh poor boy, you'd think with all that education and fake maturity, he'd have done a little due diligence. But no, he let his daddy's lies become his gospel. He put me out his life like expired milk, then turned around and tried to live off the same woman's name. He didn't just lose a mother. He lost his whole financial future. The moment the bank officially cut ties with Anthony's business, Jaden's trust fund was dissolved. The car he drove, repossessed. The house he and that girl were supposed to move into after the honeymoon, foreclosed before they could even put the keys in the door. Word spread. I didn't need to say a thing. I didn't go to no blogs. I didn't tell nobody to drag them. Because when you've got truth on your side, it don't need makeup or a mic. It walks in and clears the whole room. Now tell me this. Have you ever seen someone try to rob a woman of her dignity and end up losing their entire future instead? Just wait. They used to look at me and think, she's soft. She's too nice. She won't do nothing. They were right about one thing. I didn't do nothing. But it wasn't because I was weak. It was because I was watching. See, when people write you off, they get sloppy. They stop whispering. They stop hiding the lies. They assume you're too old, too tired, too broken to keep up. But what they never counted on was patience. Months passed since that wedding never was. Since the truth came crashing down like glass. Since Jaden's bride called off the ceremony and her daddy filed charges. Since Anthony's accounts got frozen and his little pyramid scheme came tumbling down. Since the bank finally sent me a letter that read like an apology without ever saying, sorry. I didn't throw a party. I didn't post a thing online. I just got back to my peace. Now I walk through my garden every morning, real early before the sun gets disrespectful. That little patch of earth behind my house. That's where I remind myself that roots grow in silence. You don't hear them stretching. You don't see the fight happening underground. But give it time and what was buried rises. A neighbor stopped me the other day. Said, Miss Sheila, you ever think about telling your side to the world? Writing a book or something? I laughed. Not because it's a bad idea, but because the people who needed to hear my story already heard it. I got a voicemail from one of Jaden's childhood friends, one who stopped calling me when all the lies started floating around. She said, I'm sorry. I believed the wrong people. I ain't even mad. Most people do. That's what charm does. Makes monsters look like mentors. But me, I never needed the spotlight. I didn't need to scream on street corners or chase justice in a courtroom. That ain't my way. Fighting loud don't win wars. Strategy does. I knew if I exploded early, they'd twist my anger into the proof they were looking for. See, she's unstable. See, she's bitter. So I stayed still. I stayed smart. I let them show their hand while I held on to mine. And let's be clear, this wasn't about getting even. It was about getting right. About reclaiming what was mine. My peace. My power. Folks love to say silence is weakness. But those same folks never ask why the quiet ones sleep better at night. I sleep good now. No guilt. No what-ifs. Just me, my coffee, and the sound of my wind chimes in the back porch breeze. That's all I need. And for anyone watching this who's ever been called crazy for staying quiet, let me tell you something. Don't confuse a silent woman for a scared one. Some of us were just raised to make our next move in peace. And when we do, checkmate. For every mother who's been left out after raising everything. For every woman who signed something she didn't understand, just to help. For every quiet soul who chose dignity over drama and still got labeled bitter. This is for you. And if you're still watching, if any part of this story felt like your story, then I want you to hear me when I say this. You are not invisible. You are not crazy. You are not weak. Sometimes silence is the only mic you need. If you've ever been erased by the people you raised, share this. Because sometimes silence is the only mic you need. Thank y'all for walking with me. My name is Sheila, and I came to reclaim it.